Welcome to the deep dive. You give us the sources, we tackle the details. Today we're looking way up north to Finland. Now, Finland, high latitude, long, dark, very cold winters. Sounds like, well, just about the last place you'd bet on for a massive solar power rollout, doesn't it?
It really does seem counterintuitive.
Exactly, but they've set this incredibly ambitious goal, a 100% renewable energy system by 2050. And you have to ask, why should this matter outside Finland? Well, if they can crack the energy storage puzzle there with those extremes, maybe they've cracked it everywhere. So we're diving into a technical paper you shared. Our mission today is to unpack the specifics, the tech, yes, but also the non-technical stuff needed for this huge energy shift. How do they actually plan to pull it off?
Okay, so the paper we're looking at today is titled The Role of Solar Photovoltaics and Energy Storage Solutions in a 100% Renewable Energy System for Finland in 2050. And it's important to note, this is an older paper now. It was published back in 2017, looking ahead quite a way to 2050.
Right, so it's a forward look from that point in time.
Exactly. Think of it as a kind of rigorous thought experiment. The study really focuses on investigating the technological feasibility. Can you actually integrate huge amounts of solar PV in an environment like Finland's?
And the stakes for Finland are, well, they're enormous. They have these climate commitments reducing greenhouse gases by 80 to 95% by 2050 compared to 1990. And the energy sector, power, heat, transport, that's where roughly 80% of those emissions come from. So this study basically presents zero carbon in energy as maybe the only way to hit those national targets without relying on, complicated carbon flexibility schemes.
Absolutely. And to really grasp the ambition, let's look at the solar PV numbers. Back in 2014, Finland's installed solar capacity was tiny, almost nothing, about 11.38 milliwatt.
Megawatt electric, the actual output?
That's right, the actual power output capacity, so basically negligible at the starting line.
Okay, starting from almost zero. So what kind of scale-up are we talking about in this 2050 scenario?
Okay, get this. The 100% RE scenario in this study projects a need for 30 gigawatt of installed solar capacity by 2050.
GWP gigawatt peak. So maximum potential output.
Precisely. And going from about 11 megawatts to 30 gigawatts. That's a growth factor of over 2,700%. It's a staggering increase.
Wow, 30 gigawatts peak. That sounds like it would just cover the country in panels. You picture these vast solar farms everywhere.
You might think so. But here's a really interesting point from the study. That 30 gigawatt is broken down pretty evenly. Roughly half from rooftop installations, on homes and buildings, and the other half from ground-mounted solar farms.
Okay.
And even with that huge capacity figure, the actual land needed for the ground-mounted part is surprisingly small, only about 0.1% of Finland's total land area.
Huh. Only 0.1%, so land use isn't the blocker.
Not according to this model. And we should also tackle that myth head-on that solar just doesn't work that far north.
Okay.
I mean, this kind of scale, it wasn't unheard of even back then. Germany, when this paper was written in 2017, was already nearing 40 gigawatts.
Okay, good comparison point.
And what's really telling is the solar irradiation data. Southern Finland gets around 1,100 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. That's actually quite comparable to northern Germany, which is around 12,750. It's definitely viable.
So the physics works, the land use is manageable. What about the money? Is it affordable?
Well, the economics look pretty good too, or at least they were projected to. The study noted that solar PV had already hit retail grid parity in parts of Finland back in 2017.
Already by then, wow.
Yeah, and looking forward to 2050, the levelized cost of electricity, the LCOE, basically the lifetime cost, was predicted to fall below 40 euros per megawatt hour electric.
That sounds very competitive.
Extremely. And that's driven by solar PV's really steep learning curve. The technology just keeps getting cheaper and better.
Okay, so the economics line up. The land isn't a showstopper, but we still have that massive elephant in the room.
The Finnish seasons, right? You get tons of sun in the long summer days, but then the winter, long, dark, cold. The paper even says PV production is quite insignificant then. Storage has to be key. Absolutely central. Storage and flexibility, they're the linchpins of this whole plan. The simulation they used is called Energy Plan. It found that for the 2050 scenario, only about 45% of the solar PV electricity generated over the year was used directly as it was produced.
Only 45%, so more than half needed shifting or storing.
Exactly. That number alone tells you if the storage part doesn't work, the whole 100% renewable system just falls apart. It's critical. So the study looked at a mix of technologies to handle this. You've got your electric storage, stationary batteries, but also vehicle-to-grid, V2G. Then there's thermal storage, PES. And for the really big seasonal shifts, power-to-gas, PTG.
Okay, let's break that down. How do those handle the different timescales? Start with the daily problem, those huge solar peaks in the middle of summer days.
Right. So for that daily balancing act, the study found VDG using electric car batteries was really effective. It showed a strong link with solar PV. Well, the electric vehicles in the model tended to charge up during those midday solar peaks when electricity was abundant, and then discharge later, maybe in the evening, to help meet demand. They acted like a massive mobile battery fleet,
And they were busy.
incredibly busy. The model showed them managing about 159 full load cycles per year.
159 cycles a year. That's almost every other day those car batteries are doing significant grid work.
Okay, but what about the dedicated batteries? The stationary ones people might have at home or grid-scale batteries? Surely they're doing a lot too.
That's actually one of the most surprising kind of counterintuitive findings in the simulation. Those stationary batteries, they played a really minor role.
Minor. How minor?
The model showed them being used for only about 5 full load cycles per year. 5.
Wait, only 5 cycles? Why so little if storage is so vital? It seems they spent most of their time either fully charged, just sitting there waiting for a major grid event, or fully discharged. The day-to-day heavy lifting of shifting that solar energy was largely handled by the V2G fleet, probably because there were just so many EV batteries available within the transport system anyway.
Huh. Interesting. So V2G for the daily shifts, but that doesn't solve the massive winter problem, right? The huge gap between summer sun and winter darkness. That needs long-term storage.
Exactly. That's the seasonal challenge, and that's where power to gas, or PTG, comes in.
Power to gas, how does that work?
It takes surplus electricity, like all that excess solar in the summer or maybe excess wind power,
Yeah.
and uses it to run an electrolyzer, creating hydrogen. Then, in a methanation step, that hydrogen is combined with CO2 to produce synthetic natural gas, SNG.
So you turn electricity into gas, like methane.
Essentially, yes, methane, SNG. And the beauty is, you can store that gas for months in existing natural gas infrastructure. So PTG bridges that huge seasonal gap. It converts that fleeting summer solar energy into chemical energy, into molecules that you can burn for heat or power months later in the dead of winter.
Providing baseload energy when the sun isn't shining.
Precisely. It handles the long-duration storage need. Now, beyond storage, the system also relies on how different renewable sources naturally complement each other. This helps smooth out the variability even before you get to storage.
Complementarity? You mean like when one source is down, another tends to be up?
Exactly that. Take CHP combined heat and power plants. They're crucial for Finland's district heating, which peaks in winter. So their electricity output is generally lowest in summer when solar PV is highest, and highest in winter when solar is lowest. They naturally balance each other across the seasons.
Okay, that makes sense. Heat demand drives CHP in winter, solar peaks in summer.
Right, and you see a similar thing between solar PV and onshore wind. PD output is highest during the summer, which often has lower wind speeds. Wind generation, on the other hand, tends to be stronger in the winter months, exactly when solar PV output is minimal.
So they kind of cover for each other's dips naturally.
To a significant extent, yes. It reduces the burden on storage. And the simulation results for the really extreme periods really bear this out.
Like the peak summer day?
Yeah, look at the summer solstice. Peak sunshine, lowest energy demand. In the simulation, solar PV production actually exceeded 100% of the midday demand on nearly all the days they studied.
Whoa, so way too much power. How did the system cope without crashing?
Flexible demand. It kicked in to absorb that excess. The model used up to 3,000 milliwatt per hour of flexible load.
And what was that flexible load?
Primarily those PTG plants running flat out, converting surplus electricity into SNG for later use, and also the electric vehicle fleet being signaled to charge up as much as possible. Basically, turning excess electrons into stored gas or stored miles.
Okay, clever. And the flip side, the dead of winter, winter solstice.
Right. Minimal solar PV, as expected, and high heating demand. The system relied heavily on a few key sources. Consistent hydropower, which Finland has, the higher winter winds driving wind turbines, and those CHP plants burning biomass, and, crucially, that stored synthetic natural gas produced by the PTG plants back in the summer.
So the stored gas really comes into its own then?
Absolutely. The study concluded the simulated energy system showed, and I quote, rapid adaptation through the use of various flexibility measures. It demonstrated that, technically, it could work.
Okay, so the technical simulation checks out. A 100% renewable system for Finland is, according to this 2017 study, technologically feasible, economically competitive by 2050. Seems like case closed, just go build it, right?
If only it were that simple.
There's always a catch. feasibility doesn't automatically mean it gets done. And this is where we shift focus to the non-technical hurdles. The study is really clear on this. The tech issues, like storage, often get all the attention, but they can mask these deeper, maybe tougher challenges, economic, institutional, even behavioral ones.
That's right. The paper laid out 4 main kinds of non-technical barriers and potential solutions for each. First, they did acknowledge some remaining technological barriers, mainly around grid integration and getting storage deployed efficiently. But interestingly, they argue the biggest problem often isn't the tech itself, but maybe an inefficient market structure that holds it back.
So bad rules rather than bad tech.
Kind of. The suggested solutions involve learning from other markets like Germany, which had seen rapid growth in combined PV and battery systems, and also, importantly, improving grid access and compensation for smaller producers, making it easier for people with rooftop solar to sell excess power back.
Okay, makes sense. Second barrier.
Economic ones. This is the classic challenge. New renewables competing against established conventional energy sources, which are often heavily subsidized or just benefit from inertia.
Even if solar is getting cheap.
Even then, inertia is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
The solutions proposed were fairly direct. Phase out subsidies for polluting conventional energy and actively promote new business models for renewables, especially since solar module prices were and are falling so fast.
Right. Eliminate the unfair advantages. What's the third barrier?
Institutional and political barriers. This gets into, well, power dynamics. The study talks about vested interests in maintaining the status quo, sticking with existing nuclear power, fossil fuels. It creates path dependency, a lock-in effect.
Hard to change course when the existing system has momentum.
Exactly. And fascinatingly, the study noted that back then there wasn't really a strong unified advocacy group specifically pushing for solar PV in Finland compared to maybe other energy lobbies.
So overcoming that.
It requires deliberate institutional change. And on the financial side, the study found Finnish investors had clear preferences. They weren't keen on complex feed-in tariffs. They preferred simpler, more predictable support like one-off investment grants or tax rebates. Certainty helps challenge those vested interests.
Okay, institutional inertia and vested interests. And the final barrier.
This one might be the most interesting, maybe the most human. Behavioral barriers. Psychological resistance. The study literally mentions a strong belief that the sun does not shine in Finland.
Even though the data, as you said, shows irradiation comparable to northern Germany.
Precisely. It highlights how perception, even inaccurate perception, can be a massive roadblock, perhaps even more powerful than technical feasibility sometimes.
Wow. So how do you fight a myth?
The solutions are about information and visibility, actively challenging those myths with clear data, providing real-world case studies showing practical examples of it working, changing hearts and minds, essentially.
So let's wrap this up. The big takeaway from this deep dive into the 2017 study seems to be, yes, a 100% renewable energy system for Finland, even with its tough climate, is technically possible and looks economically competitive for 2050.
That's the core finding, technically speaking.
And it relies on this really smart mix. Lots of wind, a huge amount of solar PV, using electric vehicles for daily storage, that V2G element, and then power to gas for that crucial long-term seasonal storage.
Yes. And just to restate, the paper we've been discussing is the role of solar photovoltaics and energy storage solutions in a 100% renewable energy system for Finland in 2050. Its aim wasn't really to tell policymakers exactly what to do, but more to scientifically map out the options, to show what is possible with the technology.
And the implications feel pretty significant. I mean, if Finland, facing arguably some of the toughest geographical and seasonal challenges for renewables, can model a credible path to 100% RE, well, that sends a powerful message, doesn't it? It suggests other high-latitude regions, north and south, can likely do it too. Geography isn't destiny here.
It really underscores that point. And it leads us back to those non-technical barriers. This study strongly implies that once the technology is mature and the economics work out, which is increasingly the case for solar, the main obstacles shift. They become less about engineering and more about politics, institutions, and even just belief. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. If the technology like solar PV is largely there and it's becoming economically competitive, what do you think is the single biggest non-economic barrier holding back the energy transition where you live? Is it institutional inertia, political gridlock, or maybe just that lingering disbelief, that behavioral resistance? Something to chew on.